Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fantastic session where we are talking all things meat and sharing meat. Now, I don't wear glasses, but I'm putting these on because I just want to try and sleep tonight after the excitement of doing a live video. Now, my co-partner in crime, Tracey, has just been held up at home with her kids, but she'll be on really soon to continue the interview. So I'm just stepping in to introduce you to three awesome people who I know really well and I'm very honoured to know. So Laban, Ditchburn, who is a speaker and a dirty carnivore, and he'll explain that to you. Health coach Niall Clerkin, and meat scientist Steph Fowler. And Steph is also, she works in the Real Revolution and the Diet Doctor and has been in the space for quite a long time and has heaps of info to share. So welcome, everyone.
Hey.
Thank you very much, Tracey.
Fantastic to be here, Trace. Fantastic.
It's very exciting. Now, of course, wherever you're watching from, please comment. Tell us where you're watching from. We had people all around the world last time watching. So just share your story. Let's get talking and, put some comments. I can put them on the stream as well when we get going. But I'm going to pass over to Steph. Would you like to go first and share your share your story? And I think, maybe we'll all stay on the screen. And guys, if you've got any questions for Steph, feel free to ask. But Steph, share away.
I always hate this question, as you know, because I never know when to start. I'm like, do I start like when I was 3 months old? No. So as you said, I'm a meat scientist. So I've actually come from a livestock background, which is unsuspecting given that I grew up on the Central Coast, just an hour and a half north of Sydney, very much in suburbia. So I got involved with basically showing cattle in my high school years. And then from there progressed on to getting involved. I went to ag college and learnt some more practical skills, and then went out into northern Queensland and Northern Territory and spent a few years jillarooing. And then it was actually a motorbike accident. I broke my left foot, completely smashed it, and landed myself back at uni. So the only thing for me to study, of course, was ag. I had a solid 10 years nearly at uni. And jointly at that time ended up with very bad chronic pain. My foot never really healed from the motorbike accident. I went through that whole thing where you injure yourself, you stop doing the exercise that you were doing, you're eating a standard diet, you then put on an insanely ridiculous amount of weight, which then, of course, you do what they tell you to do. You just go back to exercising more, you eat the healthy standard diet, and then, of course, I couldn't lose the weight. And this went on for probably close to, I think, maybe about 10 or 12 years of that cycle. And then I had another fall off a horse. I broke my left wrist, both bones. And I put on another 10 kilos on top of all of the other weight that I already couldn't lose. So I then got on, it was a really interesting kind of 6 months. It took me to find a decent doctor. Eventually I saw a friend of mine on Facebook from around town was saying like, I'm doing this keto diet and losing all this weight. And I messaged her and said, who the hell are you seeing? Like, who is this magical person? And I got in to see the wonderful Dr. Megan Campaign, and she put me on the bandwagon, said, buy this book. It was Real Meal Revolution, the original cookbook. I started, that was, I think September 2016. And down the rabbit hole I went from there. So being a scientist, professionally by then, the only thing that I could do was to basically continue studying. So that's what I did. And I threw every ounce of myself into reading scientific papers, reading books. I read all the hard stuff too that no one, you sort of get on the path and they say, read The Art and Science of Low Carb Living and all the really meaty, juicy, scientific, here's why keto works, here's why low carb works. And it was never ending from there. And in that time too, I then found out I had a whole heap of other stuff going on. I have a really obscure skin condition called hidradenitis suppurativa. I don't even think I say that right. and found that I had a fasting insulin at the age of 28 of about 42. So it was about 3 or 4 times what it should have been. Yeah, that's why I couldn't lose that weight. So even low carb got me to a certain point, and then it wasn't until I really chunked out the carbs, and it stayed at 42 for probably about 2 or 3 years. And finally got onto essentially eating less and less carbs and less and less vegetables. And eventually, I've lost 18 kilos and my fasting insulin is now normal. So happy days. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask what happens to your fasting insulin if you do indulge? Does it spike or can you handle it now?
Well, I'm on a fairly decent dose of metformin to keep my cysts with the hidradenitis suppurativa under control.
Okay.
So I really feel it, and then some. So I get like the sugar hangover, and then I also get like the 3 a.m. vomiting from like my body just going, can't deal, which is a really good way to stay straight. But it's really unfortunate when people hide. Like, you wouldn't believe how much flour and sugar is just hidden in stuff. And you ask people about it, and then you're throwing up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, oh, well, obviously that was too much. Yeah, not cool.
Steph, what are the symptoms of your condition? Do you mind me asking?
So the way I describe it is HS is essentially polycystic ovaries, except your ovaries aren't the organ that gets the cyst, it's your skin. So anywhere that you sweat, that you have folds of skin that rub together, you just get giant cysts, and they form scar tissue tunnels. And so they'll pop out in 2 or 3 different places and then heal over and then pop out again and then heal over. So it's not very pleasant. And I think one of the cracking points for me was I had a cyst in my groin for about 12 months, and I went to Thailand in August, and it was like 80% humidity and 30 degrees, and I had this and it was just, I was like, there has to be, what is going on here? Like, there has to be something that helps this. And I notice it now. Only I get little tiny cysts when I get really stressed, so my immune system just kind of kunks out a bit and goes, I can't do this anymore. And then I just take out a few more carbs or look at what I'm eating. Dairy seems to be bit of a trigger for me, so I can't always tolerate cheeses, which is a bit upsetting because I love cheese, and cheese of course is one of those low carb foods that everyone's like, oh, this is awesome, I get to eat all the cheese I want, like all of it. So yeah, that's a bit about my story there. Yeah. Want to go?
Wow. It's an amazing coincidence that there you were studying ag, because you broke an ankle and you couldn't no longer work with the beasts. And then it turns out that you have an autoimmune condition or a hormonal condition that pretty much reduces your diet to meat. It's just some strange coincidence in that, isn't there? I mean, did you never how do you feel about that philosophically?
I've never actually thought about it like that. I guess the biggest thing for me is that I so love cows, and I so love my sheep and my animals, and people kind of go they get a bit twitchy eyed about it. Like, how do you know where it comes from and work in abattoirs, but you still eat it? And it's like, I eat so much more because I know where it comes from. Like, there's no lies. I've seen the whole production system. I've seen, every commercial feedlot. Maybe not everyone, but I've seen a lot of them. A lot of the big companies. I understand the food system so much better because I've come from the back end, and it's like I trust something that's come through the systems that I know a lot more than I trust something that's come out of a box that has 18,000 preservatives to increase shelf life.
Yeah, and and the box says it may contain nuts because they're not really sure what's in it.
Yeah. It's a bit of a tricky thing, and I guess too, there's something about when you think about ethical food production, and there's something about the way that farmers love their animals And even the 60, 70-year-old farmer, he's been a farmer for his entire life, and he'll have one favorite cow, or, that's old whoever, and she always comes in last and we just let her go. And, I think there's a really construed perception around what farmers do, and that, they're just out there pillaging all these animals to just essentially make them grow big and fast quick so that they can just go out there and kill them. And it's like, when you're out there with a cow, like it is a bit bittersweet for me, because I do understand where they're going, but I also genuinely, like, you have that friend at the feedlot that comes up and licks your hair when you're cleaning out the water trough, and you've got that, I've got 2 potty sheep at home, and they turn up, and you just have to get out of the car and they hear the door close and they're baaing at you, and like, it's just, and you sort of still know where they're going, but there's just such a love for it, and they genuinely care about what they're doing. And I don't think that people really truly understand that until you've spent decent time in that end of the food production system. Yeah. And even the abattoir workers, like some of those guys have got jobs that perhaps a lot of people wouldn't do, and yet they do it with the utmost care and respect.
Yeah, so, Steph, I think to be able to speak about animals that way, and still to eat animals, and therefore, be okay with killing animals, you have to have seen the food production system. You have to have come from a farming background or a food production background, because it's the distance that a lot of modern people are from the basic food. They've never met a cow. They don't even know that eggs come out of chickens. It's the distance that people are from real agriculture that makes them think that it's a terrible thing to kill an animal. They think it's like putting down their dog. And I think that there's something in the way that farmers love their animals, but they also love the birth to death process, and they understand that it is a cycle, and that is how we feed the world. That is how, we make people healthy. There's something in the fact, I just think there's something in hearing you talk so emotionally about the love of farm animals, and also being, a meat scientist and a carnivore. I think that's the whole cycle. We should be listening to you. You have the knowledge, you see the entire cycle, and what you're saying is informed, rather than some people whom think are afraid to kill an animal and afraid to eat an animal, and they've never been on a farm, never spent any time with animals. They know nothing about it. They're divorced from any feeling of what real life and what a life cycle is. I just think that's listening to you is brilliant.
I'd agree, and I think the biggest thing is I don't even think as people have become removed from food, people have become removed from death. Like, I have no problem with putting my own animals down, and it sucks. Like, I totally agree why people don't like it. But I would rather put them down before they're suffering than try and hang on to them for longer, because it's got an emotional attachment for me, because it's not really about me. And I've come to realize that people are so just absolutely detached from death. And it just, like when you have the conversation about things, and one of the most traumatic things that happened in my life was my mum died when I was 18, and nobody around me knew what to do or how to handle that, or even, how to work through that grief. And so that became a very, very traumatic, as an 18-year-old, barely out of home. And then, it was 3 weeks, she went into hospital, and 3 weeks later she was dead. And you'd say, so, people would see me at ag college at the time and go, I'm so sorry to hear about your mum. This time my cat nearly died. And you're like, are you kidding me? Like my actual mum, like the one that and you want to tell me about your cat that nearly, like, it didn't even die, it nearly did. And people just don't know how to have those conversations about death. And so then when you're talking about somebody making the conscious decision to actually kill a healthy animal for our own benefit, then you're talking double Dutch, and, is it with Indonesian Dutch, or is it like what are you talking about here? Because it just have no understanding, even on and I mean, there's lots of people that lots of people that I know that are vegans or vegetarians, and don't force meat down their throat because it's something that they're not at the point that we could even have a discussion around, you know, what it is to make the conscious choice or how you do it respectfully. And that's cool. Like that's their thing. But I guess the flip side of that is then when we get into this other end where the vegetarians want to tell us all not to eat meat and want to jam that down our throats, that then it gets a bit questionable, because obviously, like, we have canines, we're designed to eat meat, and there's, you know, when you talk about the meat science stuff, you know, there's a few things that we really look at. One of them is yield, like how do we basically get the most out of animals, so we have to consciously kill less of them. But do it in a humane way, that we're not just double, triple muscling everything and suddenly it breaks its legs and can't walk. Like there's a really, and then we're talking about meat quality. So how do we make sure that people actually like what they're eating? So they're not just going to eat half a bit of steak that a cow's died for and then throw it in the bin. And then the other thing is, you know, we talk about human nutrition and what's the nutrition value? What's the value of that to us? And there is no other product, no other food that's manufactured or natural that has better bioavailable minerals and vitamins, that has a better quality protein than meats. And so it's kind of like this thing of like being able to juggle that conscious decision and do it in a respectful way, but in acknowledging that this is actually, you know, how we eat. And I mean, I'm not sure that a lion takes down an antelope and then thinks like, oh, should I really have done that? Or was there a better way to do that? Like, maybe I should have gone for the jugular a bit more and then it would have been swifter. You know, we're not above the laws of nature ourselves. So why do we think that we are? Like, we're part of this planet. It is a cycle. It is a natural cycle. But it's about doing it in a way that doesn't leave things suffering unnecessarily and doing it in the most ethical way possible.
Steph, I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure. Shoot.
I've been really privileged to interview some of the experts in these fields, people like Ken Berry and Tim Noakes and Paul Mason, Peter Bruckner, and you know, a plethora of these low carb doctors and experts. And I asked them all the same question. And it's something that I truly believe. And my question to them is, do you believe that we could solve 99.9% of all the world's problems if people just ate meat? And I'm curious to know your answer to that question.
Yes. I think a lot of the world's problems too aren't necessarily around, you know, like we talk about the billion people or whatever it is that are going to be starving to death by whatever year it is. And there's a big thing globally around nutrients and where people either have too much or not enough. There doesn't seem to be populations globally that are, you know, not many that don't either have a malnutrition problem or not many that don't have an obesity problem. It's either one or the other. And it's not so much around, I guess, that, you know, everybody wants to blame it on that we're just all fat and lazy, don't they? Like, stop moving, or that, you know, people aren't getting enough quality. And the thing is, I guess, is it's about where those nutrients are coming from, where the allocation is. So you can solve a lot of problems in third world countries by giving people the ability to farm animals, and increasing. That does two things. It increases their income, but it also increases the amount of high quality nutrients that are available in third world countries when you increase animal farming. But then on the flip side, you know, I mean, when you talk about the obesity pandemic and all of that stuff that's going on there, you know, if we were eating more animals and eating more animal products and cutting out a lot of the crap, then that would solve a lot of problems too. Like, and I've heard, like, there's even stories of people with mental health issues, haven't been able to solve my depression, my anxiety, like the list goes on. And then they go on a carnivore diet and they, you know, they feel miraculously better. Because our brains
work, yeah,
our brains are made out of fatty acids. You know, there's essential amino acids, there's essential fatty acids, there's no essential carbohydrates. Like, it's sort of that simple. And the people and the populations that aren't doing well are generally because they don't have access to those sort of foods or those farming systems, or they can't afford to buy it or to get it. And it's a no-brainer to me. It's and that's it's an educated one.
To jump in on exactly what you're saying is that studies have been done that show that deprived populations in third world countries, if you just feed the children an egg a day, which is animal proteins, that they will do far better in school straight away, right? Far better. They will jump in IQ points, right? Yet people in very rich countries like the one we live in, Australia, don't feed their kids an egg a day. Instead, they feed them rice bubbles and white bread. You know, like, you know, here we have the opportunity to have our children grow up full of nutrients. Boom, brains on fire. And instead we feed them crap, so that they're essentially getting a nutrient equivalent diet to a third world population. And here we are in one of the richest countries in the world.
And then, you know, the teachers send home a school report that says little Johnny was rank by lunchtime and I couldn't control him, and he ended up in the principal's office 3 times this week. And the parents go like, oh, well, obviously, you know, like there's so many problems that just come back to diet. And I mean, my nan was a diabetic for years, and like in the last years of her life, she had like a lot of stuff going on mentally and was just cranky and irritable. And then she'd, you know, have a bit of fruitcake with her tea, and she was drinking orange juice in the morning, and her blood sugar was just all over the place. And the ironic thing is I could just about map her mood by her blood sugar. And I'm going like, this woman's taking her rage out on everybody around her. Do you think maybe we could cut back? Like, just let's even out the blood sugar a bit. Oh, no. But, you know, it's not, you know, it's how they managed diabetics in the 1960s. We'll pump them full of sugar and then pump them full of insulin. And then they don't, the blood sugar's normal, but the moods are all over the place. Kidneys are going, eyesight's going, like all the classic markers of chronic disease in developed nations. And people are just, you know, it does my head in. It absolutely does my head in.
Steph, I'll tell you something that's pretty hilarious. I've gotten really good at setting boundaries for myself over the last few years. And every single member of my family that I've had to cut out of my life or limit drastically is metabolically unhealthy. And I don't think it's a coincidence.
Well, you know, you liken it to a diesel car. You start putting petrol in your diesel or diesel in your petrol, and they don't run real well. And then they start letting you know. And all the signs are there, but we're just not listening. Like, as a society, as a culture, we are just not listening. We just go out and we find the next drug or the next thing, and we're all looking at symptoms. And the symptoms are all adding up to say the same thing. We are unhealthy. Yep. So I'm really thankful that there are conversations like this that are happening, that there are people talking about it now, because I know, you know, in my town there's very few people that are keto, very few people, and there's even less that are carnivore. And if you know, order a salad at the pub, well, you know, you may as well have 3 heads. But then, you know, there's whispers of it. There's whispers at the gym. There's more people going keto. And then that gets them so far and they stop. And then what do? They go, well, this diet isn't for me. So, you know, the story, the plot thickens, as they would say.
Yes. When mainstream media pronounces or, you know, treats eating keto or low carb as a fad diet rather than an alternate, more ancestrally aligned way of eating, it encourages people to dip into it for a couple of months and then drop out of it again. And they don't see it as a change of life, which is how it needs to be seen. That's why people need help.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating too, because I mean, like, I'm studying a Master's of Human Nutrition, and, you know, it just, the lecturers themselves, like, this is one of the big universities in Australia, and the lecturer themselves talking about carbohydrate digestion and how the body deals with carbohydrates, talking about insulin then. And they say there's 3 key roles of insulin. One is to deal with carbohydrates, but because carbohydrates, high blood sugar is so toxic to the body, the other thing it does is it stops burning fat. So you don't burn fat and preferentially burn sugar because you cannot have a high blood sugar. It will kill you. Your brain will just, and your organs will just shut down and die. And then he goes on to say, but people use, you know, low carb diets, and it only works because you lose water weight. And I mean, I'm so lucky that it's online, because if that had been in real person, I don't think I would have been able to hold my tongue. But when it's just a video, you just sort of, and then goes on. So I'm like, you've just told me what insulin does. And you've just told me that eating carbohydrates causes your body to release insulin. And then you go on to say that physically, physiologically, biochemically, you cannot burn fat, which we're all obese, while you have insulin in your system. Any insulin, even a normal amount of insulin, will have this response. And then you want to tell people that the best way to lose weight is by eating a standard diet and just exercising more and eating less calories. And I'm just like, and so then, of course, the next generation of Australia's registered nutritionists are all sitting there going, oh, yes, that's, of course, obviously, all those lazy fat people out there. And I'm like, it's a piece of paper. Take the piece of paper. Take the goddamn piece of paper. You'll be fine. Just do the exam. Take the paper, and then you can, just join the low-carb people. It's fine, Steph. It's fine. I'm like, but they don't even, I don't think it registers, because it's just become such dogma within public health. And then, this year they're talking about they're redoing the Australian dietary guidelines, and then you look at the studies that have got, the ones that say this is how much protein's in this meat, this is how much fat's in this meat, and I just want to, the science behind this stuff is massively flawed. There was a guy in 2007 that was at Wollongong University. He went to the supermarket, he bought 5 bits of meat on one day, all different cuts, took them home, analysed them for fat, protein, this, that, whatever, and then wrote this paper, published it, I think, maybe only on the University of Wollongong website. So it didn't even go through, I don't know how much peer review they do before they put things on. And then those are the things that Food Standards Australia have used. If you look at the references in the Food Standards, this is what we're all telling people to eat list, those references, that's the reference that's there. And you go back to those, and it's not just that one, it's for everything. And you go, food is so variable over season. There's such a variation in everything. And then you want to pin telling people not to eat something like lamb on one study once. Brain explosion.
Yeah. How far from Canberra do you live, Steph?
I'm about 2.5 hours. So I'm
you got to get down. You got to get down to see Greg Hunt.
Slowly breaking into the Canberra crew. So I joined the Nutrition Society of Australia, and that's but COVID, man, it's put a hold on a lot of things. So yeah, I'm really passionate not only about livestock production and the whole how getting nutrient dense things into people. And more so because that's completely revolutionized my life and my health, but also about changing some of these things that are just thrown around like lollies in public health, and saying, because this whole dogma about lamb being full of saturated fats and it's going to kill you is just bollocks.
I love that it's full of saturated fat.
Me too.
Yeah, that's what fuels me.
It is a great source of omega-3s. If it didn't have saturated fat that high, we would actually be able to label it as being a good source of omega-3s. It is up there with fish. And if you feed algae to lambs, it's even better. It just...
Well, anyway. I saw canola oil at Aldi this morning with plenty of omega-3s as well. And
really?
I'll be damned if I'm even using that to wash my hair. But one of the key points you brought up before, Steph, I just wanted to bring up this study fact that when I interviewed Dr. Chris Palmer, who's an associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, has been treating patients with severe anxiety, bipolar, and schizophrenia with a full 1/3 remission. And we're talking about remission into zero medication for a full 1/3, another 1/3 significant reduction with reductions in medication in some cases able to come off, and another 1/3 with no noticeable difference. That's only using a ketogenic diet based on the same principles for treating juvenile seizures that's been around for 120 years. So they've only just started to scratch the surface. And to me, having experienced my own improvements in mental health that are like ridiculous amounts, and have seen it firsthand by talking to people like you guys. It's beyond a shadow of any doubt for me.
How about this? They had a 69% reduction in violent incidences in a jail among a cohort that they fed a ketogenic diet to over the cohort that they fed a regular American diet to. 69% less violent incidences. So,
but you go back to what we're made of. And, you know, like when you talk about our neural pathways and the myelin and those electric signals are pumped over myelinated sheets. Now, those myelinated sheets are fatty acids. And then we're told to cut back on cholesterol. It's the biggest lie. Like our brains are literally made of the thing we're told not to eat because, you know, nature's just out to kill us. Like, obviously, humans have evolved for I don't know how many thousands of years. And then, you know, but just in the last 30, nature has decided, you know, these humans have just got to go. Let's just kill them all on low-fat diet and be done with it. Like, it just doesn't even make sense. And there's some great presentations out there that say that. Like,
just to interrupt there for 1 second, Debbie Walthus, apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly, has brought up a really good point. She's a nurse, emergency nurse, I'm guessing, and studying to be an RN, registered nurse. And she would love to be able to do that for the patients that she deals with. And my response to that is we have a huge task in front of us, absolutely. But we must become the change that we want to see in the world and lead by example as best we can. Because it's really easy, and Steph, I hear the passion in your voice as well, and it's something that I know Niall's all about. I know Tracey, you're about the same as well. We must lead by example and be the epitome of health. And you will naturally have people gravitate towards you and say, what are you doing? Why are your eyes sparkling? And it's because you're healthy. And that's my tip to you.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely, I guess, and it comes back to that whole thing, you know, you can't fight an emotive story or an emotive anything with fact. So it's the people doing it, and it's the people living it, and it's the people, you know, just doing them. And then, the more people that are doing them out there, the more people will get curious. So absolutely.
Well, there's a lot of fear out there. There's still so much fear. So that's going to stop people from doing a lot of things. And many people are just not, I don't want to say it leaders, but many people just don't want to be the first person, because sometimes you've got to stand up for what's right and you've got to stand by yourself. And that's this whole time when I've been with a type 1 diabetic, everything we've done is almost front runner here, especially in Canberra. And then I meet a few little people who stick behind these walls that they've built themselves to protect themselves from people like the endocrinologist here, who still 4 years later wants to put child services on me. Yeah, okay, that's scary. But the thing is, I went and found where I stand rightfully, and he cannot come after me. So I know that he can't, so I keep doing what I do. And it's very scary for some people. But I'm not the one with the illness. My daughter does. So sometimes the people who don't have the illnesses have to stand up and fight for the people that do. And we have to be those front runners. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah,
you're doing an amazing job, Tracey. And Steph, Niall, sorry to cut you off there. There's one lady in particular that's come into my life recently who was referred to me by Dr. Chris Kenobi. And Dr. Chris is an ophthalmologist, an eye surgeon who put 26 years of arthritis into remission using a carnivore diet. But he still had a lot of symptoms. And Lisa Emerson is a scientist who's gone through her own incredible health journey. She's sort of just exploding onto the podcast scene as we speak. But a lot of the issues related to an iron deficiency or an iron absorbability issue. So her name is Lisa Emerson. Her website is elusiveiron.com. And I would encourage you to check that out, elusiveiron.com, Lisa Emerson.
Cool. Thank you.
I was going to say that there are two approaches to to this argument, and the emotive approach or obstacle is something we can only deal with through our spheres of influence, our personal spheres of influence, by, like as Laban says, being the change you want to see in the world and influencing the people that we can, and then those circles grow. That's the only answer to emotive arguments. But data and science is needed, and those are the arguments that are needed for legislators and for associations, even the ones like the Cardiologist Association that wouldn't look at us by saying, when you use the word saturated fat, only science and data will eventually break those people down. So, in terms of a campaign for changing the guidelines and just changing how people perceive the foods that are on supermarket shelves, both elements are completely needed.
Yeah,
I think though too that a lot can be said. Policy is basically driven by politicians, and consumers don't realize how much power they actually have in their hands. So if we all went to the supermarket and started just buying up heaps of meat, and we just voted with our feet and just bought the meat, then you would see this massive change. There would be a huge change in manufacturing and all of that stuff, because all of a sudden they would, well, hang on, what's going on here? Why are our supermarkets empty? We can't have that. This isn't very sustainable. Let's start making rules and regulations that ensure that doesn't happen, and that everybody can get equal access to these things. So it's something that you sort of saw with some of the panic buying around toilet paper at the start of COVID. People suddenly were snapping up toilet paper left, right, and center, and then all these rules and regulations started coming out about, how much you can buy or what you can and can't do with it. And I think that's quite often overlooked by people. So, the more people that are buying meat products, the more people that are eating whole food, diets, then the less money there is to be made in the other lucrative areas currently that are all the manufactured crap that we shouldn't be eating anyway. And so people just don't realize how much power they have. And the more people that, there's that curve, isn't there? There's the early adopters, and all of us on this stream currently are all early adopters, and then there's the and it goes through until there's the late adopters, where basically everybody else is doing something and they don't want to be left out. And so I think that we are slowly sweeping back to a diet of the 1950s, and we're just a little bit ahead of our time, and it is coming. That wave is coming. It's just about getting more people to do it by being that example ourselves and being vocal about that in a way that's respectful to others, I guess.
Yep.
Well said. Tracey,
I just want to help sorry, go on.
No, I
was going to help the Facebook user there.
Go for it.
Yeah. We've got somebody who lost too much weight on keto, and then they started reintroducing carbs, and then that put on too much weight, and they're looking for a balance. Up your protein, okay? Basically, if you just up your protein levels, your weight will stabilize. So drop the weight back off with your keto, and then up the percentage of protein in the keto diet, and you'll stay stable. Easy.
Well said, health coach. Well said.
No worries.
Tracey.
Yes.
Lovely to meet you. What is your story,
lovely to
young
meet
lady?
you. Oh, why I was late tonight?
No. You can tell us that story if you like.
No, just diabetes. Diet for type 1 diabetes, it makes life so much easier, because then all you're dealing with is the other garbage that goes on with it. I love electronics. They help us thrive. They help me let her be a 16-year-old. But I tell you what, when they don't work, you want to grab everything and throw it out the bloody window. And that was tonight. So I'm sorry for my late arrival, but I'm Tracey.
I think that's technology is everywhere, isn't it? It's great when they work, but it doesn't take like an ATM goes down and suddenly everyone's like,
I know. And we're so, I'm so used to getting 5-minute readings, and we just haven't been getting them today. And I can't work out whether it's the cannula. And now we've got an insulin site where we've put a cannula in, and I think it's working too sensitively because she's slightly dropping a little bit lower, but she's alive. That's fine. Just eat some meat. But yes, so I haven't met any of you. I came in, I think, at the beginning of Steph. You're absolutely amazing. Oh my God, I'm so glad you live near Canberra. Can we be friends?
We are friends. You didn't know it? What? We've been besties for ages.
Okay, yay! I'm going to come visit you. Oh my God, you're amazing. I can't believe that I don't know you. Like, I'm going to know you. Everybody, I'm going to know this lady really soon. And you're
it's going to be a competition, Tracey. It's going to be a competition because seriously.
It's going to be a competition who can talk the most.
I love this lady. She is amazing. Yeah.
So when are you finishing studying, Steph? Because I think I'll get you out there. I can talk a lot. I'll make sure that people know who you are because you're bloody brilliant. So, thank you. That was awesome what you had to, and I like what you're learning and studying. And if you ever need to vent, seriously, just call me up. I have people scream all the time because of the system and because of something and because of something else. So.
Awesome. So that's why we're besties, Tracey. That's why we go way back.
I love it. So just so you guys know a bit about me, I have Ashley, who's my type 1 diabetic. I
thought she was your kid.
She is my child, yeah, my Ashley. I have an Ashley. No, she's 16 this year. She's diagnosed at 11. We do not have diabetes or type 1 in our family at all. I didn't know what was happening. And I was a pretty good swimmer and athlete growing up. I thought I knew a lot about nutrition until Ashley was diagnosed, and then I had to learn what insulin was. I'd been learning it 6 months before that about how bad it can be for you because my father was quite metabolically ill and getting sicker and sicker even after having a bypass at 47, and he was 50-something and getting worse. So we did a lot of learning, found low carb, then my daughter got sick. And then my daughter actually still got sicker. Beginning of last year, towards the end of the year before 2019, she was getting worse and we were on a ketogenic diet. And I learnt a hell of a lot about what oxalates, lectins, goitroins, everything, all of it, and what they were and how they were destroying her system. And she went from having type 1 diabetes to having Hashimoto's and celiac. So we went carnivore with the help of Dr. Paul Mason in Sydney. And I've been just so amazed at just how much, like I've always been a meat eater, never denied myself meat, always eaten meat, but I didn't realize how much that was probably keeping me afloat and keeping me healthy within pregnancies and being able to come back after having 4 children, rebuild my body because I was always a big meat eater, and just ate veggies because they were there. Didn't really, they're just there, so I ate them. Now that I just eat my feet of meat and cheese and fat, I'm thriving even more because I'm not filling up on all the other stuff my body doesn't need. And I've got a daughter with a HbA1c of 4.9. So
congratulations.
Thank you. That's hard work. It's still hard work. It's a lot of late nights and early mornings, but she's got a learner's license. Her other autoimmunes where we can help them to calm down. She's never going to be rid of type 1 diabetes, but it shows how much what real food and eating, like you were saying, Steph, and everybody else here, that we're eating the way the body is meant to eat. She's fueling the way she's supposed to be fueling her body, and that's with meat. And I won't be told any other way for health what we should be eating.
Tracey, one word of encouragement, one phrase of encouragement: never, ever say never about type 1 diabetes, because words that we use are very powerful. Because I was told by 17 different medical professionals, 2 surgeons and 2 endoscopies that what I had was incurable. And guess what? It's gone.
Okay. I won't say never. Okay. In her lifetime, we may see a vast improvement of type 1 diabetes. But at this stage, that little bugger's never gone away. So that's okay. But yeah, okay. So I'd love to listen to everybody else's story, journey. This conversation is like just gold. I just messaged Tracey and said, this is gold. I love it. So who wants to hop in the hot seat next?
After you, Niall.
Okay.
That means that Niall wants to hop in the hot seat.
Hi, Niall. How are you?
Hello.
And you're
I'm
in
Niall.
Melbourne?
I'm in Sydney.
Sydney. Okay.
Sydney's beautiful northern beaches.
Oh, lovely.
I was explaining to somebody today that unlike the poor Victorians, when we got locked down at Christmas, there were 14 beaches we could go to, 2 national parks and 3 towns. It really wasn't that bad. So that's my gloating over the Victorians. But basically somebody said, oh my God, you guys had a lockdown at Christmas. How did you get through it? And I was like, that was not a lockdown. The whole of the northern beaches just had to stay in the northern beaches. It wasn't too bad.
Yeah. Okay. So you didn't have kilometers that you're allowed to travel from home. You could just travel within you were quarantined within your own quarantine. Yeah. Gotcha.
It looked on the news like, we were being hard done by, but we were not being hard done by. Yeah,
that's the northern beaches saying to Melbourne, like, hold my beer, I'll show you lockdown. That's not a lockdown. This is a lockdown.
It's a lockdown. Yeah.
Lovely.
Well, I'll tell you my story, Tracey. Many years ago, when I turned 40, so I am 46. Yeah, just before I turned 40, I read a book called Primal Endurance by Mark Sisson and Brad Kearns. And I thought, I'm going to get into running long distance or doing triathlons. Definitely, I'm nearly 40. Let's have a crisis. Let's get into distance running. And while we're at it, I'm going to go paleo. Yes, ancestral eating is for me. And I did things like acquire, very unpopular man here, acquire things like this, And for quite a number of years, I ate paleo, and people thought I was a weirdo just for eating paleo, which essentially just means ancestral whole foods. Not really too difficult, right? But from the age of 39 to 45, I ate paleo. And I was doing lots of running, and after a successful race, I decided to give myself a break. And I was like, put your feet up, Niall. You've achieved a great time. Let's all be happy. And that mental decision turned off everything in my head. And so I gave myself a break from eating paleo as well. And I just went back to eating normally, okay? Or let's say more like everybody else. And in 6 months, I put on 8 kilos. And so I started 2020 at 84 or 85 kilos. And I'm only 175 centimeters high. And so that was like a BMI of 27. Not that BMI is worth a shit. And I just thought, wow, this is the heaviest you've ever been in your life, Niall. You're going to have to lose this weight. So I had been listening to a lot of low carb podcasts, and I went, all right, it's time to just get off this paleo thing. I'm not going to go back to paleo. I'm going to go full low carb. And in the first month, I dropped 3 kilos just instantly, and I started feeling great. And I thought, I'd love some data points here. I'm going to go to the doctor and get lots of information. So I went to see my GP, who I only go to like every 2 years. I went in and I said, John, I'm doing this low carb diet. I just, want to get all my blood work done because exciting things are starting to happen and I want to track it. And so we did. And my cholesterol, which had always been high, went from 7 to 10 or 11. And the doc says, oh man, 11, you need a statin. And I said, do I really? I mean, I've got none of those factors, none of those risk factors for heart disease. I'm sure I'm fine. I don't need a statin. Can you send me to a cardiologist or something? Let's do that instead. So it took a month to get me in front of a cardiologist. And I went and I saw the cardiologist, where he did a stress test on me. And normally when people are doing a stress test, they're not marathon runners. They're people who are out of shape, smoking, drinking too much. So the cardiologist was looking at my heart going, this heart is mint. You are in great shape, young man. No problem. You're not having a heart attack. But I still want you to go on that statin. And I was like, wow, come on. You just said it was perfect. And he's like, yeah, but your cholesterol's just too high. You need to go on a statin. So back to my GP, and he said, the cardiologist said you have to go on a statin. I'm like, man, I don't want to go on a statin. I don't want any drugs. And there's no reason, right? Now, one of the podcasts I was listening to was one called Peak Human out of LA by a guy called Brian Sanders. And I heard the aforementioned Dr. Paul Mason on that show. And he was talking about a couple of things. And the show before him or the show after him was an Irish guy called Ivor Cummins. And he was talking about calcium scores. So I was like, that is my out. I'm off to get a calcium score. And I did. And I turned out to be in the 95th percentile for calcium in the arteries for a 45-year-old man. Like the top 5%, the worst, right? And so this was not going to be my out with my doctor. Basically, at 45, I already had hardening of the arteries. Now, in my social group and my work group in Sydney, I was the least overweight of everybody. In that, at this point, I wasn't really overweight, right? The least overweight of everybody, the fittest of everybody, and had the best diet of everybody. And I have this 95% CAC score. And I'm going, what the absolute FUCK is this? Now, that sent me down a rabbit hole of discovery. And I must now fess up that I smoked from when I was 17 until I was 35. Right, that's almost 20 years of smoking, chronic inflammation in the body. And so I started to learn that the inflammation causes insult to the arteries, which causes hardening of the arteries. Then I found out about the seed oil damage, right? And I had been living on seed oils, fried in seed oils, chips when I was a kid, living on it. Big family, like 6 kids, all getting fed out of a deep fat fryer from when I was 6 years old till when I was 20. Then in my adult years, thinking I was healthy, canola oil, everything that I was told to eat, the greenwashed diet, I was throwing it into me, absolutely throwing it into me. And it turned out when I eventually got in front of Paul Mason that I had massive inflammation throughout my body. But I was running marathons and I was, not overweight. But I was, even though those doctors who were telling me to go on a statin hadn't known about the CAC score, I was on my way to a heart attack, like totally. So I am now 1 year in to trying to do the elusive, which is reversing the hardening of the arteries. I'm trying to bring the CAC score down. Okay. So, I mean, it was instant. We take all seed oils out, only animal fats going forward, maybe a touch of avocado every now and again. We upped from an irregular low carb diet, we upped the meat massively. It's like 50-60% of my diet is now meat, maybe more. I find that I still need to add in pickles and, a few things, a variety, but basically I'm eating animal products plus avocado and pickles, maybe a tiny bit in 95% dark chocolate. That is it. I dropped 10 kilos. Now my weight never changes. It is 75 kilos day in, day out, right? I did 30K on the trails this morning in a massive storm here in Sydney. And then I had a beef brisket in a pub at the finishing line, right? So no food beforehand, got up at 4 a.m., got a train to the other side of Sydney, did the run, no eating, completely fat adapted. The body is feeding itself. I feed it meat, and the body either feeds off the fat in the meat, the fat in my body, or through gluconeogenesis produces glucose to provide energy for me. And it has literally transformed everything. My brain is on fire. It is. I'm self-employed. I have a couple of small companies, and it is business idea after business idea after business idea. It is book idea. It is blog. It is podcast. It's everything is just going off. And my brain hasn't worked this well since I was 14 years old. And my body hasn't worked this well since I was 14 years old. It is astounding. And people, I know I'm bald, right? So being bald ages a person, right? But typically, I'm wearing hats because I don't want to burn my head all the time, right? So I'm usually walking around in a hat. And everyone thinks I'm 35 because my age is going backwards since I started this. I looked older 18 months ago. My age is going back. I mean, is that a thing? Can that happen? Right? Well, apparently it can happen. You know,
Isn't
and
there
these
a
things.
movie, Benjamin Button? Are you like the Irish Australian Northern Beaches Benjamin Button? Are we going to lose
Based on
you
Niall
soon?
Clerkin.
Yeah.
Steph, did you just compare me to Brad Pitt?
I think I
thank you.
did.
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
I did.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I love her. I love her. Anyway, that's like, that basically is my story. It is like, sure, I'm hopefully reversing my heart disease, and that's a great thing, right? But you know, this is not an emotive story. Like, I mean, Tracey's daughter is a far, far bigger story, a far more important story. I'm just an ordinary bloke who thought he was reasonably fit and in good shape, and turned out on the inside, utterly unbeknownst to me, I am just a bag of inflammation.
Yeah.
And then I start looking around at my mates going, dudes, you need to get a look on the inside. You really need to take a look, you know, because they all have the middle-aged spread starting. They're all just getting, you know, a couple of kilos every day, every year. They're, you know, building a bit of weight around here. It's all going to come back to haunt them. And then, of course, they're all going to suffer, you know, from sarcopenia on top of that as we age through our 40s and 50s and 60s. And then it's just going to be, something's going to happen that they're not going to be able to come back from. And so now what I'm obsessed about is trying to catch people who are still in their 40s before it is too late, before they've had a heart attack. Catch people in their 40s and get them to realize that they can absolutely gun it at life still. Like, actually, I took down a few books while somebody else was talking there, right? Only for 2 points, right? Carnivore Code, right? Dr. Saladino in the States,
I want
right?
that book. I want that book.
Well, in this book, he makes, like, I mean, it's a very, very detail-oriented, science-oriented book with a lot of tests and trials recorded and data. But he makes a point that most people who are subsisting on a regular diet are moving along at a 4 or a 5 on the life scale that might go up to 10. They can't even conceive of what it is to see life through the lens of like gear number 9. Can't even conceive of it because their diet is not giving them the energy and the mental clarity and, you know, just the wherewithal to see life like completely differently. And so they're at a 4 or 5 and have no idea that 9 and 10 exist. And he makes that point in there. And I just think that it's a very illustrative point. And then this book, which I've read twice and listened to twice, Sacred Cow. This is a magnificent piece of work, right? That essentially, like, it approaches the 3 things that are the main problem with people thinking that they shouldn't start with meat. And that is that in the first instance, it talks about how it proves the case for meat being the most nutritious food on the planet. So if all you want to think about is health, it has to be meat. There is nothing else. I don't care how much spinach or spirulina you eat. It has to be meat. There is no comparison, literally no comparison. Then they go 2 and they disprove essentially a lot of the environmental arguments. And then 3, or that's 3. And number 2 is the animal cruelty and animal welfare arguments, and basically how if we do nothing but produce plant-based diets for everybody and row crops, we kill entire ecosystems that regular farming actually supports. There's far more death on a plate of plants than there is on a steak. And I guess that's mental to get your head around. But I mean, they prove it categorically. And those 2 books are just astounding reading for somebody who wants to really look into the science of converting themselves to meat. Or if they want to read books that will give them the ammunition to say to their wife, husband, mother, father, brother, no, mate, this is what I'm doing. And this is what says it's true.
Sorry to interrupt here. There's one thing about your story that's really stuck out to me, and I have to, and it's going to kill me if I don't bring it up. But you said that you actually so you decided to do this thing, and then you've gone to your GP and said, I want to track it. Now, that for me, as a man, I am so much respect to you for doing that, because you talked about how, you know, health, all, you know, people that you know are waiting, you know, they're putting on the weight, they're getting unhealthy, you can see it coming, but they won't do anything about it until the health, something happens, there's that trigger, the heart attack, the diabetes diagnosis, whatever that health crisis is. And I just wonder if you guys might be able to, you know, maybe touch on a bit about what it was that made you do something about it, because it's just, it's that mask of masculinity, isn't it? Like, there's something about men seeking help before there's something horrible that's going to kill them that they just don't want to do.
Okay. Well, then I can answer that in a slightly roundabout way, right? You know, 20 years ago when the internet was being founded, I was on a chat board called P45. Now, this was when you get fired in Ireland, right? The letter you get is called a P45, right? And so essentially this chat board was saying, you know, if you're wasting time on this chat board, you're going to get fired, right? No, so it was just a little bit of humor by the early internet people. But I rather egotistically had an avatar and called myself a Renaissance man, right? Now, it was utterly egotistical, but it has always been my thinking that if you want to be a real man, you brought up masculinity. If you want to be a real man, you should develop skills in everything, in all areas. You know, you should be protective and the traditional things, but you should be empathetic and you should be emotional. You should be creative. You should be fit. You know, you should be knowledgeable about science. And the Renaissance as a movement was all about multi-skilling. You know, all of the great Renaissance thinkers were not, you know, it wasn't just a poet. They're a poet, they're a scientist, they're an astronomer, you know, they're everything, they're inventors. And I've just always loved that idea that a person can be interested and like at least attempt to excel or grow their skills in many, many areas, right? So I've just always been that person. But many years later, I'm not so egotistical and I would never, you know, sign myself off like that ever. You know, I was obviously a 20-something ass, you know, but it's the same thinking that made me want to, you know, do that. It was like, I find myself getting fatter and I was like, this middle-age thing, how am I going to approach that? And so I thought, okay, I want to find a solve for that. You know, it's just, I don't mean to call it, it's not about being competitive, but I just always want to be good at things or do well at things. I'm not a passenger, you know, and I think that's more of a personal characteristic. So, you know, I know that you're writing off all men there with your statement saying men, you know, don't ask for help. And, you know, and in a way I didn't ask for help. I did my own research, you know, and came to my own conclusions, you know, which is probably my version of that trait. But I also have this idea that when you get to 40, like I think the 40s are my best decade of my life so far. So instead of thinking that your life is like you're on the backside, it's still going up. So I have this idea that if you get to 40, you should have acquired a certain amount of wisdom, life experience, and hopefully resilience, right? So if you don't let your health fall apart at that point or your body fall apart at that point, just think of what you could achieve through your 40s and 50s and the vibrancy of it. And also I have kids who are really young. My kids are now 5 and 3. So when I am 57, my daughter will be 13. You know, and if I'm going to play footy with her, I better be bloody fit. You know, I don't want to be on like 6 drugs and carrying an extra 20 kilos around the belly, you know, and that's important to me. Because like basically at 57, that's in the old days, that's a granddad's age. But today it's very common to be a dad at that age. And so unless you want to be a decrepit old dad carrying all these chronic diseases of modern civilization, you better shape up and start learning some stuff in your 40s.
Yeah. Yeah, even earlier, I mean, you just said before that you want to help people in your 40s, and maybe your story isn't as important as mine. Your story is so important. You know, type 1 diabetes, it's growing, but your adventure, what you're going through, I mean, yeah, it could have turned very serious and very ill, and I'm sure you're still reversing a lot of what metabolic health issues you have, but you're doing the right thing. I think your story needs to be told to many people and start being told to even the 20-year-olds these days, even the teens. I mean, my daughter comes home from school and she goes, Mum, they're having shapes boxes. That's all they eat at school. They take boxes of shapes. And I'm like, oh. And she said, oh, I had 3 boys sit there and talk to me that I'm going to have a heart attack by the time I'm 20 because I'm eating the pork crackle that you gave to me. What should I say to them? I'm like, well, first, just calm down, darling. You're going to get yourself into trouble like your mum does. But it's really scary. Look, I've had a friend who's 35 and he's just had to go and get a stent put in because he's got 90, 80% blockages. I got a second cousin who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at 28. These illnesses are happening earlier and earlier, and it's scary because we have this mindset that fat people are the unhealthy people and skinny people aren't.
Well, that it's a cultural norm. It's how many things are there on Facebook about the dad bod? Putting on my dad bod. It's like,
seriously, that really pisses me off. Yeah, because my dad bod is a lot nicer.
And it's this whole thing too. People that are addicted to carbs, it is one of the hardest things, I think, because it's this whole thing where it's socially acceptable to take a whole box of shapes to school. It's socially acceptable to be the guy at the pub sinking 6 beers in a night with his mates. It's socially acceptable to do so many things that are actually really not. And I think that's your story is really powerful because it's bucking those cultural trends. It's showing people that there is another way. And, there's power in the average guy, because how many guys are out there that are just like you that wouldn't know what to do about it, wouldn't know where to go, don't really have the interest in being a marathon runner, but, here's something like go, well, hang on a minute, because I could just eat more meat. Like that's a pretty good diet. So,
I've got there's a couple of questions there that I can answer. Which is Anna has asked how meeting helps with the calcium buildup. Well, really what that is about is it's the absence of inflammation, because when you have inflammation in your arteries get damaged, and then the calcium buildup is actually an attempt by the body to repair the damage. So if you take away the inflammation, no more damage happens, right? And so by removing seed oils and high insulin, basically, so carbs, and therefore replacing that with meat, you get less inflammation. So my CRP, which is a measure of inflammation, used to be like really, really high, and now it is less than 0.4, which is a negligible CRP count, so negligible amount of inflammation. So, I mean, that's number one, that is huge. Michelle has said, hi, Niall, has your cholesterol dropped? I'll just scare you, Michelle, with saying that after it went to 11, it went to 12.5, then it went to 15, and then it went to 17. And everybody just tensed, right? So did I. I was tensing pretty tightly at that time. But the truth of the matter was, I was losing weight at the time. My body was eating its own fat, and it was putting triglycerides and cholesterol back into the blood. So for a 12-month period, as my body was coming back to its weight, I had high amounts of movement of triglycerides and cholesterol in my blood, and then it has settled back down. Still not that low. I'm a high cholesterol person, I think, but in the absence of inflammation, which, as I've pointed out, I have none anymore, cholesterol does no damage. So cholesterol is a secondary agent. It is only doing damage where there is inflammation. And the reason the cardiologists and doctors go after cholesterol, well, there's a very long, warped history about that, which we don't need to go into. But what they recognize and understand is that almost everybody is running high on inflammation. Anyone on a regular diet is running high on inflammation, and therefore the existence of the cholesterol is a problem. So you have to remove the inflammation, and then cholesterol is irrelevant. And I mean, I'm not a doctor. Go talk to Paul Mason or somebody about that, and they'll tell you that too.
Cool. I think there was a question just quickly on running or doing sport on paleo and keto. What's the difference?
Yeah. What's the difference?
Well, with paleo, you're not. Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, I mean, paleo makes no difference to doing exercise to regular diet, because with paleo, you are not necessarily at all fat adapted. You're eating less carbs, you're eating more sweet potatoes, etc. But they are just ancestral tubers. So you still are in a moderate carb diet. So your body is not fat adapted. So paleo is not really much difference. But when you go keto, when you get properly fat adapted in the early weeks, when you're going through your carb withdrawal phase, your energy sucks, right? It's a carb withdrawal. Your body's reacting just as if you're on an alcohol withdrawal or a cigarette withdrawal, and you have low energy for a few weeks, and so you can't hit it in the gym or go for long runs. But once you've sort of clicked in, you discover that you don't need to feed yourself anymore when you're doing long activities, and that's really it. I could, go out and do a half marathon any morning. It used to be that I would, put on a wee bag, I would bring some gels, bite to eat, make sure that my blood sugar wasn't going to drop. And now I don't need anything, just bring some water. I mean, even if that. So that is a huge difference. Your body just finds the nutrients it needs in you. But if you're not fat adapted, your body has forgotten how to do that. And that's why you need to go through that carb withdrawal process. Your body has to get a bit of practice at accessing your own fat for its energy. And if you don't give it that practice, then it will never work. So that's why people call it fat adapted. There is a process there where the body relearns how it used to operate. That babies come out of the womb fat adapted. They come out in ketosis. And the first milk, colostrum, is actually a keto food. It's
it's very fascinating.
It really is. Yeah, it just shows that it's just so natural. Yeah, and so easy to thrive that way. So easy to thrive. In fact, even now, I suppose I truly, the first few times that maybe I had some cake or some bread or just something, or I went to a party and something that, clearly not on diet today, it would take me a few days to get back. But if today I did that, I will be back in tomorrow. So again, the body has learned how to put me back in that, fat burning condition again, like really quickly. So I used to avoid getting out of it because it was so annoying having to come back in over a few days. But now it's pretty much straight away. It's no problem.
Metabolically flexible.
Hey, the holy grail.
Yeah. Well, that's my dad's there now, and he's 67. So I'm pretty proud of that. But can I just say I like your shirt? Is that carnivore? So, is that for carnivore night?
eat brains, not grains. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I got this T-shirt special for Organuary, which, if anybody doesn't know about it, it's the nutritious version of Veganuary. Yeah.
I love it. Well done. What a wonderful story, journey. Fantastic. And I think if anybody is listening and they need help or advice, you'd be fantastic. You've got a lot of knowledge there.
Do you know what I just want to say? Just in an echo of what happened to you with the doctors, like, basically, hitting you, getting back at you, trying to argue with you. My GP, after I got the scans, the cardiologist said my heart was perfect. However, my cholesterol was high, etc. We had that argument. When I was having a discussion with my doctor actually used the words. My GP, who had been going to at that point for 6 years, said, "I wash my hands of you. You're not going to go on a statin. I wash my hands of you." And that was a local GP here in Manly Vale. And I really felt lost for the next few days after that, because I was like really hurting that this must be one hell of a decision I am making for the doctor to say that to me. But since then, I have discovered that, of course, that I was making the right decision, and the doctor was just being a prick who didn't want to look outside his own, the age-old paradigm of, Mediterranean diets or whatever the dietary guidelines say.
Yep. Yeah.
But he made me feel terrible and scared and like, panicky, and so that was not a nice thing to go through.
Yep, totally understand. But yeah, no, we're up and fighting now. But yeah, so thank you. Laban, how are you? Is that right? Did I say that right?
You said it beautifully. Yeah, I'm blessed, Tracey. I really am blessed.
Sorry.
And not many people get it right first time around. So kudos
Really?
to you.
Oh, thank you. I always get worried that my Queensland side of me might come out when I'm pronouncing names.
Well, in a twist of irony, my name, Laban, in Arabic translates directly to yogurt, which is technically a keto diet if you go in the Greek natural yogurt.
Yeah.
It also means fight in the Filipino language.
Okay.
And that sort of leads me to my journey through this whole process.
Yeah, okay.
And it really started 6 years ago. If you look over my left shoulder,
Yep.
that's me. That is
Wow.
what I like to call a young, fat Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
If anyone remembers Dr. Phil, Oprah's mate.
Yeah.
And I found myself in my bed on a Tuesday night about midnight with 3 bottles of red wine coursing through my veins. And I was gambling on a horse race in a country that I wasn't in with money that I'd borrowed that wasn't mine. And I had this epiphanous moment where I thought to myself, this is not the life that I imagined as a young man. And in that moment, I noticed a phone number for the Gamblers Helpline in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And without even thinking, I picked up my phone and I called the number and I spoke to this extraordinary woman whose last name I never found out. But her first name was Mary, and I affectionately call her my Mary Magdalene. And Mary was a gambling counsellor of 30 years, and she spoke to me about the incredibly high rates in which gamblers commit suicide. Because out of all the addictions, it's the one where people lose everything the fastest. And gambling wasn't my only vice. I was an alcoholic, I was a recreational drug user, a philanderer, a limiting believer, a negative self-talker, and I also had been dealing with an autoimmune disease in the form of GERD, gastrointestinal reflux disorder. And I'm very proud to stand here in front of you and to share with you that in August of 2021, it will be my 5th year of sobriety and a lot longer for all the other vices. And in that process of healing my mind and my spirit, and as I started to love who I was, I really started to take note of the physical. And I came across a podcast on Joe Rogan's show with functional medicine doctor Chris Kresser, and he spoke about the link between gluten intolerance and heartburn. And as I mentioned earlier, over the course of my 17 years with this disorder, I'd been told, without any shadow of any doubt, that what I had was an incurable disease. And I watched this podcast with a quizzical mind, and I sort of cocked my head. I remember thinking, I wonder if that's me. And I cut it out, and it was gone within a few days. And I got a DEXA scan done before I started that removal of gluten. And I got one 3 months later, and I lost 3.5 kilos of visceral fat just around my organs. Mm-hmm. And over the course of that 6-year journey, I came across a ketogenic diet early in 2018. I lost a bunch of weight, started putting on a bunch of muscle. I inexplicably started running. I went from 5 kilometers to 26 kilometers in 1 week to 27 kilometers the following week. I ran a 3-hour 56 marathon the following week. I ran a 50 kilometer 5 weeks later, and then I completed my very first 100 kilometer ultra marathon in September of that year, about a 6-month period. And thank you. And I never had a history of running. And what was happening is my body was healing. And when I switched over to a carnivore diet, that's when the magic really happened for me. It coincided with a really amazing emotional breakthrough, some forgiveness that I had allowed to happen with my mum. And this extraordinary feeling developed in my stomach. And it was kind of like a non-sexual orgasm is the only way that I can really describe this feeling that I had. And with the benefit of hindsight and speaking to some of the smartest people on the planet, it turns out that it's to do with the amino acids that were the result of the meat that I was eating. And now that my gut health was functioning, that I was dumping dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin into my body. And I was sleeping with really great REM. So I was restoring, and I was able to run and train and sleep and recover. And I've lost 60 pounds of body fat through DEXA scan and put on 25 pounds of muscle. I don't go to the gym. I do a little bit of body weight, and I'm a distance runner, which for any of those exercise physiologists out there will know that it's typically a catabolic exercise, as in it burns the muscle. And I am in ridiculous shape. I'm 40 years of age. I still play Premier Cricket with Melbourne University Cricket Club, and I captain a young side there. And I am outperforming men and young men more than half my age. And I don't say this to gloat or to brag, but I want to share it with you to inspire and to give you hope. Because in addition to that, my mental health has gone through the roof. I started a recruitment business at the start of 2018, which was a complete and utter financial disaster. But it was with the help of the species-appropriate diet that gave me the mental fortitude and the courage and the bravery, the dino balls, I call it, to persist through and come out the other side of that. And I have had the most productive 3 years of my life, and I truly believe that I've achieved more in the last 3 years than I have in the previous 37. I met the woman of my dreams in the streets of Melbourne. People treat me better because I'm fit. My eyes sparkle with energy and vitality. My ability to influence and lead has improved. And the people in my sphere are noticing and putting their hands up and saying, Laban, what are you doing? I want to know what's going on. And this is why I've become a speaker, to talk about the addiction and my journey. And for that, to answer your question, Tracey, I am very blessed.
Yeah, well done. No, that's, what a story. I mean, what an adventure. We're the same age. And I wholeheartedly believe that we can make change if we really, really want to. And one of the ways we can is by fueling our body the right way. I found the more that I ate the right way, the more that I could continue to keep going the right way. And it was one step in front of the other. And that's what I tell a lot of the clients. I'm a health coach here in Canberra, and it's amazing just how many people, it's hard working through any addiction, sugar addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling, whatever, any addiction that you have, it's hard. And yes, I know at the beginning, sometimes the hardest step is actually forcing your way through that addiction and eating the right way. But the more that you can do it, the more this one becomes less, and you can distance yourself from that, and you're feeling not a new addiction, but that sensation, like you said, that non-orgasmic, sexual orgasmic feeling. Once you can get that, and that's where I say to people, just keep going. You will get there. You will get there. I totally understand where you're coming from with that. I've rebuilt my body 4 times after having 4 children. I'm lifting weights now. I'm running. I walk 15 Ks a day, carrying 15 to 17 kilos. Most women are having prolapsed bladders. They're having issues. They can't walk. I'm not saying I'm brilliant. I've worked hard to where I am, but it's because I eat right. These things, we can achieve real human success if we eat a real human diet.
Amen, Tracey. And Carrie's asked the question, why Dirty Carnivore?
I was going to ask that. What is Dirty Carnivore?
Well, one of my superpowers I've discovered is my vulnerability and my authenticity, which I know gets thrown around a lot, but for anyone that's known me long enough, they know that I am very open with my demons and owning what's happened to me, because they are now my superpower, my fuel. And the reason I say dirty carnivore is because I have adopted a largely carnivorous diet, but I am a deeply flawed individual, someone who still grapples with addiction in the form of sugar. And if there's something that comes along, rather than drinking a bottle of whiskey or doing lines of cocaine or ketamine or whatever it might be, I will destroy a litre of ice cream, and have been known to melt a packet of 95% cacao lint in the microwave and to put the egg beaters through the Hinterland vanilla ice cream, which I did relatively recently, and I can highly recommend it as a cheat meal.
Okay. I didn't know what dirty carnivore meant. I mean, shouldn't that just be Laban's choice of lifestyle? Like, I really don't like names. Like, people ask all the time, you know, what is it? I'm predominantly animal-based, and I will tell you that I am 95 to 97% animal-based, but I make a ripper of a Parmesan cheese mushroom sauce to go on steak, and I will eat that. If it's birthday, Christmas, I made a trifle and I ate that. I like to get people to know what fuels their body, and they're okay with their boundaries and what they eat, and make it their diet. So that's Tracey's diet. And if it doesn't suit you, we'll bugger off. I'm not eating for you. I'm eating for me. So I think that's okay. If you're happy with that, then I don't know why we have to call it dirty.
No, it's not. It's not a negative. And here's one thing that I think is really important for people to know. I removed all negative self-talk, and I don't say dirty in a negative way. It is more of a topic or a conversation starter, because I even called my recruitment business Carnivore Consulting, recruitment with Byte, B-Y-T-E, because it was an IT recruitment. And you know what? It polarized people that weren't supposed to be in my life and brought into my life people that were supposed to be. And so that's why I do it. And I think... you know, you've got to do whatever suits you. I am pretty fearless. What people think of me is none of my business. And I look the part, and you can't take that away from me. So come at me, bro.
No, I'm just curious, because I try to help people so much. And I love the attitude. If you're happy with what you do and you use it as a conversation starter, I kind of like that. That's interesting. Because it brings in an element of you.
It takes up a whole layer of guilt, though, too, doesn't it? Like, really, we slap a label on ourselves, whether it be keto or carnivore or you know, like whatever it is, and then, you know, quite often you see people that are, you know, they're trying to hold themselves up to, you know, well, I slipped yesterday and life got me, and so now I'm a horrible person. And you know, I think all of us that have been on this journey for long enough, you know, there's all times that we slip and fall. It's what you do, or, you know, it's whether it's, I guess, because it's, as soon as you do slip and fall, it is a conscious choice, but it's how you talk to yourself and how you know, react to that. Yeah. So I love that, Laban, because there's no guilt involved. And I think quite often, you know, sometimes it's better just to eat the thing rather than feel guilty or, you know, shame yourself into a corner. It is hard to be on this path in a carb-laden, addiction-fueled world. And it, you know, I think it's great.
You know
I wouldn't recommend it every day, but...
Yeah. On that exact one is I allow myself a few beers, you know, every now and again, or I used to allow myself a lot of beers. And but to take Steph's approach... You know, I instead of like worrying about it and mentally going into some level of mental anguish, I just drink the beer, right? But what I've discovered is that as my body is just more used to a better diet and a better diet and a better diet, that those beers make me feel worse and worse and worse. And there's progression there too. So now I actually don't fancy them as often, because my body's actually saying, nah, don't do that. Don't do that. I don't want to feel shit tomorrow.
Steph, you asked a question earlier in the conversation regarding men and asking for help, and to shed some light on My reason for asking for help was I was in tremendous pain, and I don't mean physical. I was at a point where my life could have easily slipped down a very, very dark hole, and I never experienced suicidal thoughts or anything really terrible, but I could just, my intuition was enough to know that I needed to ask for help. And I love sharing this story. I love talking about it and empowering men and women, because I think, you know, our vulnerabilities are our greatest stories, and the power of vulnerability allows a really immediate connection to people. And when you are able to develop that really quick connection to people, you get trust and they buy in, and that's what's been happening. And I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, I guess the thing it comes from, you know, I guess a lot of females get to a certain point and they decide to lose weight, and they go through all the, you know, you hear the story all the time. I've gone through 10 diets, none of them worked. I guess, you know, as a female on this path, I find it very hard to have conversations around this with men, because it's kind of like this thing of like, no, I'm fine. Like, unless I'm in a hospital bed having a heart attack, I'm fine. And so I guess my bringing that up was kind of more, I think, a little bit selfish, but, you know, like, as a female on this path, it'd be great to know, you know, how to support men specifically, because I know that no amount of cajoling, like, my husband's not remotely, and I just, you know, but you love him. So you want him to, you know, you want to, and I think that that's something that a lot of us probably have, where we've got these figures in our life, men, women, whoever it is, and you want to support them and want to, you know, give them the gift that we've got ourselves. So I guess, you know, that's kind of how do we, from your point of view, because I mean, I can speak the female language, so to speak, but I struggle when it comes to men. So I guess that there's a point where I sort of want to know, you know, you guys have done it, you've walked the walk, you've talked the talk. How do we encourage other men to do it before they have that health crisis?
Well, I was going to say that men love data, you know, so, and data doesn't lie. So if you go off and get a battery of tests that say you are not metabolically healthy, these are your numbers, and don't have a doctor interpret them, because the doctor will go, oh, they're within the normal population ranges, which is BS. Just get the numbers, and then have your man do the research on what those numbers mean himself. And very often it's inevitable that you come to the conclusion that, oh, this isn't right. And men love data.
Steph, it's a great point, Niall. I'm a bit more ruthless, and maybe that's why I'm not a health coach. I spoke about boundary setting earlier, and I've recorded 84 podcasts since April last year, and about a quarter of them are with some of the smartest people on the planet, low-carb experts. I've mentioned some of the names earlier, and I used my diabetic father as a case study so that he would watch the podcast and his light bulb would go off and he would go, thank you, Laban. Thank you for providing me that information. And you know what happened? Nothing. He never even watched the podcast, and he's withering away and dying before my eyes. He's 70 later this month. And what it taught me, and this has been a real journey of discovery, is that sometimes we just need to let people be, and to continue to lead by example, and to bring the people into our network and our ether that want the help. And you know, I know it's really challenging with family members, but don't ever be afraid to cut people out of your life that do not serve you well. We become like the 5 people we spend most of the time around. Mm-hmm. With your husband, it's a really different thing. And we know men particularly don't like being nagged. It's a response that never seems to work. And I'm not saying that you're doing that at all, but if you can thrive, if you can be healthy, if you can thrive and you can be healthy, sooner or later, if that man's supposed to stay in your life, he'll see the light. And you know what? Sometimes it's a way to polarize the person in your life, which I know is probably not what people want to hear necessarily, but it's really powerful.
Yep, I posted up just only the other day, actually. It was, you cannot force someone to comprehend a message that they are not ready to receive. Still, you can never underestimate the power of planting a seed. And I talk a lot. I know I do. People tell me a lot. But seriously, the amount of seeds I think I've sown and I've planted, I hope, sprout, and they will when they're ready. And I've had to do that with my husband. He's ex-army, 6'5", thinks he's, bulletproof. And it's only just been recently where he's had a few more hiccups again. He does some pretty horrible things with work that he has to do, and that mental health comes into play. And we ebb and flow between, I do with him, between keto, carnivore and low carb, because he cycles also. So I help him move and flow between food. But sometimes I just have to plant little seeds. But sometimes, like Steph said, I have to be a bomb sometimes and go under and just explode and nag. And yes, most times I win. But it's challenging because he doesn't want to see himself as being, I suppose, weak or a burden, or, it's scary, because it is scary to go and ask for help, especially as a man. You are especially in the military world, you're treated differently. So that has been ingrained in him. But he also knows that if he doesn't do it, I'll drag him to wherever he needs to go. So he loves me.
Tracey, there's a great quote from a motivational speaker called Les Brown, and he says, ask for help so that you remain strong, not so that you appear weak, and keep asking for help until you get it.
That's very good. Very good.
That's probably, quote, sums up my journey with my daughter. So I'm not afraid to ask for help because I'm not afraid to be wrong. But I guess I'm one of those people, is that Confucius says, you're only stupid until you ask the question, and then you're no longer the stupid one. That's my whole life but I've been blessed to have a father who never told me to shut up. He and I compete for conversation, and most people that know my dad know that we can have 3-hour conversations. And like, Niall, you've been putting your hand up. I have to do that with my dad. Dad, me, now, my turn. So I'm not afraid to talk. I'm not afraid to ask questions. Whereas my husband came from a different family background where questions were seen as, do not question me. I am the superior. I am the adult. Just, don't ask questions. So I guess it's within us all sometimes how we've grown up to whether we ask questions or whether we don't. But it is different, I think, for men and women when it comes to medical advice and help. It's more known that women will be more emotional and can more easily, I suppose, ask for help. But you both have amazing stories, adventures and journeys that I think it's very important that a lot of our young men and some women, because women do suffer from a lot of these things too, know that there's people here to help, to guide, to talk to. It's very important. We've got so much technology in the world these days, and we're the least ability to talk and communicate and connect, but we can connect anywhere. I mean, I can right now, if I wanted to connect with a friend over in America, in Germany and places like that, yet we're the most distance from each other these days, and it's sad. So that's why I wanted to do these talks, so people can connect.
And just quickly, if anyone's curious to know about my cholesterol and my calcium artery scan.
Laban, tell me about your cholesterol and your CAC score. I'd like to know.
My cholesterol ratio is 4.4. My triglycerides are 1.2. My CAC scan last year was a 0, which is about what you want. I think that's what Niall was hoping to get down to. And all of my other markers are, my doctor has high-fived me recently and says that I'm the healthiest person she knows. So, and no fibre, no plants. So I must be dying of something else.
Yep. Yep.
Love that.
Yeah, you know what? You're going to die of that
anyway.
thing. There's a disease. It's not very common. It's called nutrient overload. Yeah, you're going to die from that.
You're going to die of old age. It's not very common these days, is it?
My GP has a permanent record that when she logs into my account, it says patient says he's going to live till he's 150. The power of positive thinking. There you go. There's a tip for you.
Yes. Live long and die fast. Don't die fast. Yeah. Or don't die slow.
And prosper fast.
Well, it'll be you, and doesn't Dave Asprey say something like that? I think too. Dave says that he's going to live till he's like 150 or something. So you and him will battle it out for the world's oldest man.
I'll live longer. I'll live longer. You watch. Mark my words.
Yeah. That's stubbornness right there.
Yeah.
Can I just say, Debbie, I totally understand your statement just there. I'm very feisty and fighty when it comes to my health with my children and my husband getting help. But yes, it is very difficult sometimes because for most part when I go to the doctor, if I'm doing anything, I am by myself. And if I have questions or if somebody's talking to me, it is a sense of vulnerability sitting there with someone who you think does know better, but sometimes you have to remember when you go into these appointments with doctors, you know yourself better than anybody else. They know bits of you because they've read a book, they've studied, and they've got a white piece of paper, but you need to go into these appointments and know who you really, really are. But I do understand what you're saying. Asking for help for ourselves does make you vulnerable.
Yeah,
I get it.
Great statement, Tracey. And one thing that I would say is that I have become an insatiable learner, and it's nearly 460 books that I've read in the last 4 years. I would say a quarter of those are at least on health and well-being, and that excludes all the podcasts, which would be thousands of hours. It takes discipline, it takes effort, but you can become far more knowledgeable than any medical expert that you'll deal with as a generalist, I believe. And just seeing, having known Niall for as long as I have witnessed his knowledge base just go through the roof. And just listening to him speak tonight was just so impressive, because as a health coach, I want someone who sounds confident in what they're doing. So kudos, Niall. It's amazing. I mean, I don't know you as well, Tracey, and Steph, just meeting you both tonight, I'm sure you're on the same path. You certainly sound like incredibly knowledgeable people as well.
Phew, so, okay, yep, that's what I was going for.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's the 4 uni degrees really of like, I'm so glad you can recognise that. I think that's one of the
uni degrees.
The hardest things is, I'm just going to keep talking about that. Okay, I don't get to go into that. I'm addicted to learning. Being a lifelong learner, no matter what you do, is I think one of the most, but not even learn, just curiosity. Like being able to have a thought and follow that thought, go down the rabbit warren, and see where it leads. You know, all of us have tried several paths, several things, different diets, different things didn't work. You know, things continually change. And I think that, it comes back a lot to what you were saying, Tracey, about labels and sticking labels on ourselves. You know, just go down the rabbit warren. That's my advice for people. Just go down the rabbit warren, see where it leads. Yep. You know, none of us are on the same path together, but we're, on similar paths on our own. But it's having that curiosity to follow a spark. And I think as people, we've lost touch with that. And we don't think anymore. We just, there's someone in a white coat that knows better than me, and I'll take their word for it. And
correct. I mean, I've learned more about type 1 diabetes from Richard Morris, who's a biochemist, and Dr. Paul Mason, who's a sports medicine metabolic health specialist. And they will tell you they know nothing about type 1 diabetes. Well, what I know about type 1 diabetes, I have learnt more in the last year from those two men than I have from anybody, from an endocrinologist who I was supposed to see every 4 months here, who told me that I was going to kill my child by lowering carbs and not having her gallbladder taken out, because his mate is the specialist and wants her gallbladder out. And I'm sorry, but I knew better. Well, I thought I did, and now I'm glad that I did.
You know what's terrible?
So I was going to say, have you gone down the Paleo Medicina route at all with Sabertolf?
I follow them. Yeah, I do follow all those people. Yep. Because I watched Carnivore Con, and Paul recommended that I watch. They've got some very interesting data and stuff on type 1 diabetes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Niall.
No, I was going to say is that, I mean, Tracey, you're, obviously you're interested in fighting. You have the personality for fighting. You've got the curiosity, which means you had the...
Not really. I don't like fighting. I just have to because it's my daughter.
Yeah, there you go.
You like it.
That's enough. Yeah. But you had
I'm not a fighter.
you had the confidence to follow your curiosity and try to get answers for yourself. So many people don't have that confidence in their own research ability, which is what Steph was talking about earlier. And those people, their kids are all getting pumped full of insulin and, are going to end up with type 2 diabetes as well as type 1 diabetes. And there are lots of other illnesses that families, people, children are falling into treatment patterns for that same reason. The parents are cowed down to the white coat and not confident enough to do their research and, make bold decisions themselves. And that comes back to our education system, which is, a much bigger problem again. How do we encourage thinking among our students so that as adults we actually know how to critically appraise a topic? And it's not something that gets taught. It doesn't even get taught in university. Unless you're studying philosophy or ethics, it does not get taught in university.
It doesn't. And can I just tell people that I actually have no tertiary education. I finished high school and that's it. Everything I have learnt is because I have learnt and I needed to. So it's out there and you can do it. I'm not putting anybody else down. I actually want to go to uni now. I'm trying to work out what it is I'd actually like to study as a 40-year-old going back to uni.
History.
It doesn't matter what you study. You can just do it 4 times like Steph.
It doesn't. I know. I'm actually thinking, I could do 4 now.
Steph the thermometer, Fowler. More degrees then.
I'm addicted to pieces of paper. My husband says I need someone to give me a piece of paper so that I can wipe my bum.
Which you do less on a carnivore diet.
Way less.
True. And then throw in fasting and it's even less, so we're all good.
But I want to encourage people that, we do hide and think that these doctors, and for the most part, there are many doctors. I work alongside Dr. Liz Fraser, who runs Low Carb Canberra with me, and she is an absolutely brilliant woman. But she got sick herself too, and she's been through many things, and that's how most of what she's done and what she does today for her clients and patients is because of what has happened to her, and that's what makes her brilliant. And so I'm hoping for myself that my journey is the opposite to many. I've had to learn and live life for the last 20 years since leaving school, and now I'm going to go and study and be able to put what I've learned into practice and not do the reverse. So I'll catch up quickly, I hope. But I want to encourage people to go and do their own research and learning. You can do it. Definitely. It's easy. Yeah. There's a stop-start button on the YouTube videos. You can go back and read what have to say 60 times if you have to until you get it. Don't worry, I've done it many a times. Richard Morris is one of my best mates, and he's done biochemistry. And I'll ask him a question. My question was this long. He writes back this much, and I will read it 60 times if I have to until I understand it. But there is information out there so you can learn, and I encourage people to learn. It's your body, it's your health, and do it. You will do it when you have to. Start
now, optimize later. Tracey is one of my favorite quotes. Start now, optimize later. And one point I would just say is that all of the stories that have been shared tonight for our audience that are going through their own journey, it's not about you anymore. You had now a burden of responsibility to be vocal with the story, because the words and the stories that you share will inspire, empower, and encourage other people to take their life into their own hands. And next thing you know, you'll be on a panel, or you'll be up on a Q&A, or you'll be interviewed on the TV for empowering and having a massive impact on more people's lives than you can quantify. And that's what I think about this now. It's beyond me. It's out of my hands. I have to share this story now.
Yep. I talk to everybody at Coles. I helped this lady. Well, my husband helped this lady the other day because she couldn't reach the top shelf, and he's a walking ladder. So he reached down and she wanted the Nanada yogurt, the Nanada ice cream. And I went, oh, that's low carb. Have you heard of keto and low carb? She goes, oh, have I? And she pulled her trolley over. We stood there for 45 minutes. My husband's going, jeez, this is why I don't go shopping with you. But I talked to her. Yeah. So I have conversations with everybody, and I encourage people to do it. You never know who you might help.
Okay, Tracey, I'm going to have to go. It's 10 to 10. We ran a little over. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this today. It has been wonderful.
Yes.
Happy to be involved in anything else that you do.
Thank you. We'll also have to thank Tracey wherever she's gone to as well. I think she's jumped
probably
off.
to bed.
Yeah. Okay. I told you I could talk. I warned you all. I can talk.
Tracey said 10 minutes. She said 10 minutes each.
Yeah.
10-minute blocks. 20 alone, wasn't it? Like anyway.
40, Steph. Yeah.
No. Thank
Time
you all.
flies when you're having fun.
Lovely to meet you. Thanks to everyone tuning in. There were some great questions coming in as well.
There were.
So
Thank you. It's lovely to meet you all. And beautiful. Thanks. We'll chat again. I'm sure.
ElusiveIron.com. Lisa Emerson. You need to check her out. She's a pioneer. I'm not getting anything for it. She's amazing.
All right. Okay.
Cool. All right. Cheers.